Hello and welcome back to Puppet Time Online. I'm your host, Eric Wright. This is brought to you by the Puppet Kitchen, which is your home for professional puppetry. I'm super excited to have you back. Thanks for joining us at our new time. Not a new time, special time this week. You know, it's a little relaxed around here, so we can play a little fast and loose with it. But thanks for viewing the show and following us here to 4 o'clock. Also, you may note that I'm wearing headphones. One big thing is that Katie, who is usually here catching questions and your comments and making sure that I run the show great, is not here right now. She got caught up at work. So her actual job, not producing the show job. And so I'm flying solo today, but I think it's going to be great. Thanks to StreamYard, which is powering this broadcast. Anyways, I'm really excited for our guest today. She's a good friend of mine, and yeah, I'd say probably a talent crush in terms of like her doing her job really well, and me being like, I wish I could do my job as well as she does her job. She's really great. She is a part of Beady Little Eyes, which is a puppet company in Portland, and she's also the co-writer and producer of a short film called Melvin the Bird, which is a part of Heather Henson's Handmade Puppet Dreams film series, and it's available on Amazon Prime right now. I would like to introduce Katie McClenahan. Katie, hello.
Hi, how are you?
How's it going?
It's
all going very smoothly so far.
All right, yeah, in Portland, covered in hazardous smoke, but aside from that, they're going pretty good.
Well, we'll try and keep you inside for the next hour at least, which I feel like would be a bonus.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here on the show. The first thing that we like to start off with is just to ask people about how they got into puppetry.
Good one. Let's see. I started out as a musical theater kid. I did a lot of stage stuff as a young adult in Texas, where I grew up. There's a theater school there called CATS. Took a lot of theater and dance classes there, which led me to go to college to get a musical theater degree at NYU, and discovered pretty quickly that I did not like that world. And I, on a whim, because I thought it sounded easy, took a class in puppetry. And that class, one of the requirements was to watch a show, go see a show with puppets in it for the semester. So I went and saw, I think we've talked about this, but I saw Hiroshima Maiden as like my first, like, brain-crushing, like, unbelievable experience of a show, Dan Harlan's show at the St. Anne's Warehouse. And that honestly was a huge turning point for me. I was like, I had no idea that puppets could do this and do that and tell stories this way. And I mean, all in all, so fortunate that I was in New York, and there's not many schools, I think, that could say you must go watch a puppet piece this semester. I know that there's like so many options. So that's when I stumbled into. And then from there, and then from there, right out of college, very fuzzy memory of how it happened. But I ended up seeing a music show. I went and saw a lot of live bands and saw this show called Jolly Ship the Whiz Bang Band.
Yeah.
They were like, we need a girl singer. I was like, okay. So I sort of got in along with this ragtag group of pirate puppet musicians, and they were super fun and crazy and about to go on tour in England or Ireland. So I hopped on with them, and I was a backup vocalist and a puppeteer for that insane amount of time.
What kind of puppetry was that?
They had gone to Bali. The two lead guys, the guy who was writing all the lyrics and singing the songs, and then and the guy who was writing all the music. And they had these like Balinese rod puppets, and they just decided one of them was this character, Captain Clamp, and then the first mate was a human. So Raja, the musician, would just come on as a human and talk to this pirate puppet who had his own world. And then there were all these funny cursory characters, other pirates, a sea scallop, a bird, like a seagull. There's a lot of crazy antics and characters there. And I did not have too much experience at that point in puppetry, but I had enough, I think, to do that kind of work. And then in college too, I had done some shadow puppetry stuff for a show that I was in. So yeah, it started dabbling before I even knew that it was really something I wanted to pursue. And then found the O'Neill and started going there in 2010, I feel like, and that really ramped up the people that I had met and just seeing work, just like absorbing and finding people and watching their work and talking to them about it, and the O'Neill.
Yeah, the National Puppetry Conference there. It's pretty amazing. Okay, so when did you graduate from NYU?
I graduated in 2000, and I was class of 05.
Okay, so now you're a good 15 years in, which is, like, that's good. That's a good amount of time. It's a beginner level, I'd say. So the question that I like to follow up with these days is, what keeps you in puppetry now that you're here?
Also a good question. When I moved to Portland, which was 10 years ago now, in 2010, same year I started at the O'Neill, I started doing puppet slams, and it's kind of definitely a labor of love. I love the production part of it, but I also love the performing bit of it. And I just started doing the slams. So a big part of it, maybe why I've continued to do slams, is there's an expectation that I do the slams here, which like is a little bit of like, when's the next slam? And then I'm like, oh yeah, I should do that next one. So that's part of why I still do those. But I've sort of redirected myself recently, because I burned out a little bit on the puppet slam model, and been wanting to do more considered, rehearsed, completely full pieces or films. So why I've stayed in it is a big part is the people too. I mean, like, I have so many friends through puppetry, many more than I made in my college program, where it should have been. Those should have been the lifelong friendships, and ended up being the people that I've met after that have stuck around my life the most. I think it's just about finding your people, maybe. There's something about the difference between musical theater and puppetry. It's sort of like maybe it's a control thing. I don't know.
I mean, for puppeteers, the only question is, like, what kind of control? Like, is it direct control? Is it but I understand.
But yeah, casting and storytelling was a big part of it too. Like, I didn't really want to audition for parts where somebody would look at my hair color or my height and not cast me because of that. It just didn't. That to me is not an artistic experience that's all that pleasing. To be picked, not be picked for somebody else's artistic vision. And puppetry, it's so you make your own or create your own, or find collaborators that are birds of a feather, and you guys can make a whole world that's believable. I mean, that was sort of where the Melvin the Bird film came out. It was just a collaboration between 3 people, and we didn't live anywhere close to each other. Which was kind of fun and also kind of difficult, but but that was
how did that all start? Did you guys had met at the O'Neill, or so it was you and
me and
Nicholas Mahan and Spencer?
Spencer Lott and Nicholas Mahan. I had met Nicholas here in Portland. He actually had this giant toad costume that he had made while working out at Michael Curry Design here, and he started hosting. He hosted some of the earliest, most like insane puppet slams, where we were like starting at 10 p.m. and it was really rowdy. and he would just like say all these like terrible, awful things on stage, and I would be sort of like, shocked. And then he would come backstage and be like, "Oh my god, I can't believe Mr. Toad just said that." Yeah, we did all kinds of crazy stuff. So we got
Right.
along so well. And then I met Spencer actually at we got put together. I don't even know if he remembers this. I bet he does. But we got put together at an audition in New York for Emmett Otter. Um,
Uh-huh. I
and
remember those.
yeah, so we got put together as improv partners or something. I think it was some sort of
Right.
improv we had to do. And I was like, this guy's so funny. He's so great. And then we just sort of kept in touch. And then the O'Neill, we'd run into each other there. And I can't tell you why the three of us decided to collaborate. I do know that original in the very beginning stages of it, Nicholas was still here in Portland. So the
Hmm.
idea we would collaborate here and Spencer would be out there. But then in the middle of it, Nicholas moved to New York. So
Right.
it still worked out. And yeah, I think it just started with a series of phone calls like, hey, we want to try and make this film. And then we applied for a grant from Heather Henson's Handmade Puppet Dreams,
Hmm.
which you just got one of those I saw.
Right. The little mini commissions for quarantine.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm working on a new project with that cohort, which is a really exciting thing.
great.
Um,
Congrats. That's like brand new breaking news. So
yeah.
yeah.
I want to talk about Melvin the Bird a little bit. Look, I have a little photo um, that we can look at. So this is our eponymous character, Melvin. Tell me a little bit about how the story started. Where, a lot of people ask about where ideas come from, and it's always so different for everyone. But this one in particular, it's such a great story, and it's such a simple story that is just beautifully told. I'm really curious to see where that idea started and like what was the germ of that project.
So before we looped Nicholas in, I remember Spencer and I having these like idea conversations. And he is just a machine, that guy. He's amazing. And so we just started riffing.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think we literally came up with like one sentence or maybe even like 5 word, 3 word things where he just kept on going down this list of like, you know, different things. And I don't know why, but we stopped at I think it was like woodpecker love song or something. And I was like, that? What's woodpecker love song? And then he was just like, I don't know. Maybe it's blah, 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 blah. And then, we just started spinning through like, oh, and then what if? Oh, and then what if? And I
Yeah.
think part of living in Portland might have informed some of the woodsy nature of it. And
Sure.
birding is
Were
a thing
you
here.
were you brainstorming in person or was this over the phone or like
Over the phone. Yeah, this
that's
was
amazing.
probably the face. I remember almost all of this being collaborated, like emailing things and then talking on the phone, with the three of them. And
Hmm.
we also knew, so it was kind of cool that we had the restrictions that we had in terms of like, okay, we want it to be a short film, so 10 minutes or less. We want to be
Hmm.
able to ship it across the country easily.
Hmm.
So that sort of informed this like really cool paper world that Nicholas created, which is
Hmm.
beyond any of what I ever imagined. It's so beautiful. Like he just got into his zone and he knew the camera lens, I think, and set it up in his apartment with all the like little pieces, and he would make, everything to scale and in proportion as it needed to look in camera.
Right. Right.
Crazy person. And then shipped it all in like one big box. It's still actually all up in my attic here.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But they're not 100% flat, which is kind of
Right.
cool. Like a lot of the, like, and this main character, like
We can show a little bit of the
yeah, the back.
behind the scenes here.
Hmm.
That's really cool. Oh, here's a good picture of
Yeah, so that's the
kind of
back
behind the
character that you just were showing. So the little rod in the middle with the circle, those are his eyes, and they can move in and out.
Hmm.
And then on the left side there, those are his lids that open and close. Yep.
Hmm.
Um, so it's cool because there's like, and there's a 3D element of the visor of his hat. So
Right.
we created a real shadow, which was important. We didn't want it all to just be like paper doll printed, So
Yeah.
he made all these incredible artistic decisions that were all just like, I mean, he just showed up and we're all like, it's perfect. It's so
Here's also a picture of the sort of the setup that you guys have.
yeah.
How big is that main puppet?
There's several. So the one that Anna is manipulating there is probably only like 4 inches high, but that doesn't have any moving
Hmm.
parts. This one, it's just like
Hmm.
like boop 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 boop. And then the
Right.
one from the main image that you saw was probably like 16 to 18
It's
inches
pretty,
high.
yeah, pretty big for a paper puppet.
Yeah, yeah. Can you make them big enough to not show too much of the shakies while we were shooting?
Hmm.
Small enough
I
to
mean,
like,
just the residual movement of your hands.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Which there was still plenty of that for some of the smaller stuff, but we had 2 sets going. So this is a studio here in Portland, and the DP's name was David Emmett. So
Hmm.
talented, incredible photographer, and he makes stop motion stuff too. But he let us use his space and was the DP for this, and incredible with he just crafts everything with light and does really cool things with camera moves. And but we had one set on one side, which was like an open-ended sort of set that you see here. On the other side
Hmm.
is like maybe like 10 by 20 sort of framed pictures. So we would jump back and forth, and like there's one shot, I don't have it here, but there's a shot of Melvin like laying on the forest floor, and it's like all the trees around him, and that's pretty.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
we just sort of shoot. It was a lot of just like looking like actually like if you were standing back, it would look like nothing was actually happening when we were fully shooting like hero animation because it would just be just like the slightest little movements. But then when you look at the footage, it's everything you need for the performance of the paper. So
That's really cool.
yeah.
So you were the producer of this. Did you also, because I know that your day job or your job outside of puppetry is also in project management and production management. Did you carry that in? Were you the project manager also of the Melvin the Bird shoot, or was that someone else?
Yeah, I'd say I did a fair amount of the on like all the on-set production and wrangling of the shoot days and everything. Technically, Heather Henson is the executive producer, and then Samuel
Right.
Gugino is the I think the managing producer, but I was the one, yeah, on site dealing with all the actual day of and scheduling all of it, and then also scheduling the post work and figuring out the music, which was
Hmm.
beautiful by Brad Kemp. Yeah, and all the editing and yeah, so that stuff comes pretty easily to me. Probably because I also do it for work and have been doing that for a while, producing photo shoots and video shoots and things like that. So
Can you talk a little bit about what that job is? I think it's not really brought up a whole lot when talking about puppet shows, but especially in my experience running a puppetry company and just, you know, it's one of those jobs that you need in order for things to run smoothly. Can you just
yeah,
talk a little bit about what that job is like?
yeah. I definitely sometimes when I try and split my brain into doing both the creative and the production stuff, I can get in my own way. I'd say that's one of the biggest
Hmm.
pitfalls of also being a producer is that like it's a little harder to be the dreamer, I guess, in the room of like I want to do this. I'm
Right,
always like putting myself in line of like you don't have the money for that or whatever. but
right.
um but yeah, I mean I guess there's some essentials of project management like putting together budgets, pulling together just people, like making sure that as well as you can that the people that you're working with are communicating and communicating with each other and playing nicely in the sandbox. I like to say, creating space for people to be creative and talk and communicate is important. Um,
Yeah.
And
Ryan has noted that you are a production powerhouse, which I would tend to agree with, even though I've never technically seen you in action on the day. But I feel like that's really true. And I feel like, there's only a handful of people that I would say that are like deep in the puppet community that really have that as one of their outward facing skills, which I think is super, super valuable. How did you get good at it? I'm asking for me.
it's funny. I guess oh man, my friends in New York, because I lived in New York from 2001 to 2010, and they say that when I left, it was like the glue left, and I'm like, what are you talking about? And I guess I always was on like organizing things and like
Yeah.
reaching out, following up, and doing all this. I guess I don't know. It's funny because it's something that I didn't really realize was a skill that was all that necessary or needed or difficult for other folks to wrangle in until I just had to be told a lot to believe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I I I guess it's like any skill though. You just keep doing it, and then every time I do a new photo shoot or I have experience, they're all like special little snowflakes. So I don't think that there's like a book, like a you
Right.
must do this and you have to be good at Excel spreadsheets or anything like that. It's just like
Right.
it's just organizing a whole bunch of stuff in your head at once.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm getting worse at actually. I have to take more notes now, so I write more shit down than I ever have before.
Yeah.
Um, but it's communication and just making sure
Yeah.
that you're like. And I'm often a broken record, and you kind of have to be okay with being annoying,
Mm.
like pretty like really like over reminding people of things to where you're
Mm-hmm.
potentially something that they're doing, but to remind them,
Mm-hmm.
sign a contract or jump on this meeting right now and things like that.
Right. Right.
Um, and there's a billion different ways to be a production person. You can be the one that like freaks out at the caterer for bringing runny eggs, or you can be the
Right.
one who quietly goes to the store and gets some eggs in
Get
our
some eggs.
front. there's there's just so many ways to conduct an orchestra and to
Yeah.
do all of
Was it ever something that you like identified as, I guess you said it wasn't really a skill you identified, but like once you said, oh, this is a thing that you do, did you set out to study it? Did you take classes or watch videos or anything about how to do production management better?
I did take a project management course at PSU, Portland State,
Mm-hmm.
several years back, and my work paid for it. It was when I
Mm-hmm.
got thrown into the world of photo production, and a bunch of the clients were bigger, like Nike and Adidas, and there
Right.
wasn't anybody actually at my place of work that was doing it. It was just me, and so I had no
Mm-hmm.
formal training or anybody to be like, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do that, or when you do this, maybe try that, or it was just I was like truly thrown into the fire fry pan, yeah, the fry pan, to try
Mm-hmm.
to figure it all out, and it's just. I think that what I learned mostly from those like high level, really intense, stressful jobs was just like again communication, but like also like just admitting when having enough confidence in yourself to be like, I'm confused by this conversation, and if I'm confused, that means something's unclear, and to ask
Right.
questions in the moment. And I think that's one of the hardest things to learn in a high stress environment is that everybody wants to know, like they know exactly what's going on, and
Mm-hmm.
so many times there'll be two people in the room that are actually talking about two different things and they think they understand each other, and when you're like, I might be way dumb here, but what do you mean? Like, and like just, you know, I think it can be a really toxic thing to be in an environment where everybody is the expert and believes that all the time what they're saying is true and right and they know exactly what's up. And
Yeah.
I feel like one of the biggest pitfalls of production is that like nobody thought to ask like the simplest, like backing up the train and just being like, but is $1,000 enough for that vision?
Right.
Oh, right. Or like, I don't understand what you mean by that. Can you clarify? Like,
Hmm.
have my coffee.
Do you feel like the challenges are similar with big clients like Nike and Adidas as they are to some smaller clients in the puppetry community?
Yeah, I do. I oftentimes when I would go from doing a Nike job, because I was freelance for a long time, and then somebody would approach me about another production and be like, well, we don't have Nike money, but we have this. I'm like, well,
Hmm.
it's the same essentially. It's like you still have to fit it into a budget. You still have to find the right people, and then and if it's an unrealistic budget, saying so, um,
Hmm.
finding finding how to make it work with what they've got. But
Hmm.
it is of course different with like live theater production. Um, there's much less money talk there because a lot of people don't don't make any money on the shows that we're doing because it's all a passion project. But
Right.
but it's less about money, but still it's the same sort of tasks of like, if my end goal is envisioning me producing a show on a stage with 10 acts, um, what does that look like, and then how many, how big, like what's the theater, and then you just like back it up. You just like, I just envision myself with like the end product, and then go through all the steps that I think need to happen with press or with you know ticket sales, or and just go through it all. And delegating is hard at some points because I've already thought through what I think needs to happen at certain points, and so it's like, it's just easier if I do it. But that's a real big pitfall too. And production
Oh,
management,
yes.
I mean, sometimes you don't have any money to pay people to help you, and so that's just the way it is. But
Right.
if you do have people that are like, I want to help, I want to help you do this, you know,
Hmm.
you can let them. That is no. um, yeah, but
Is that, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, in terms of formal education, one class, one semester when I was working in photo production, and and then everything else has just been kind of on the job.
I feel like the times that I have felt like I've made any improvement on project management, it has required, the requirement is that I've taken a real step to look back at the job that I've done. And one step that I often forget is that sort of look back and say, how did it go? What could be better next time? Because there is going to be a next time. Is that a like a distinct step that you take in your process as well?
Oh yeah, I think that's super important. I think getting feedback from people, if you can, it's hard when you're freelance if it's your professional job, because
Right.
a lot of times people won't bother with feedback because they don't care. They'll just find somebody else.
Hmm.
Um, in a freelance world. But when it comes to like live theater and stuff, I find that I really am interested to know what people think of the shows, and what, you know, sometimes people are offended by pieces that are in the shows. Sometimes they hated pieces, were bored, loved them, wanted to see more of this or that or the other. I love all that stuff. And then in terms of like my own production, I feel like every time there's like one thing that I forgot, and so I keep these template spreadsheets for puppet slams that are like budget, performers, what we estimated, what it actually costs. And then at the last tab is like a post-mortem tab, like a, what did I forget? What went
Hmm.
wrong? What did what did I set the ticket prices at? All the things that like you think you'll never forget. And then 6 months later, you're like, what did I do wrong? Or what? Someone forgot the ice, or like
Yeah.
we didn't actually make any money at the bar. We should let another person, a vendor outside, do that for the hassle that it is, and things like that. You just forget all the bad stuff at some point,
Yeah.
and you keep going because you want to keep doing it in a show. So yeah, definitely looking back, that's super important. And
Yeah.
I leave myself little Easter eggs of notes, like don't forget that you messed this up, and don't forget
Uh-huh.
that you got on stage and didn't tell anybody what your name was. Or like, it was like classic. Like, hi, this is the have fun, like, they're like, who are you?
Who's that? Who's that crazy person?
Yeah. So, stuff like that.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little about Beady Little Eyes, which is um, the puppetry company you're part of in Portland. Did you start that company?
Yes.
And how is it set up? It looks like on your website you have a huge number of artists, puppeteers that are associated with the company. What is Beady Little Eyes? What does it do?
It's definitely morphed over time. It's um spoiler alert, it's just me, basically. But I wanted to, at a certain point with my website, I wanted to give shout outs to the performers that were performing in the puppet slams. It was originally set up for like a puppet event company, and it
Uh-huh.
was featuring the slams. It was providing me an LLC so that I could uh, I paid taxes on the income that I make, and there's some protections there and things like that. So it's not just
Right.
me. Um, but I wanted to eventually, like, the artist page came from like, well, I want, if people come and see the shows and they don't have their program, or whatever, if there's one thing they took away was the website, then maybe they can find the performer that they saw and they want to see what else they're doing, or um, things like that. So it's not really a collective in terms of like, we don't meet once a month and come up with shows. It was
Hmm.
more of a way to keep the events that were happening up at the on a calendar, having a blog, which has also not one of my strong suits in terms of keeping up. Neither with social media.
Put
I
it
really
on the old New Year's resolution list. No,
need
I
hard on that.
hard.
Yeah, yeah. If I really wanted to pump it up, I would see if there was somebody I could hire to do social media stuff, because I just am terrible at it. It's
Yeah.
definitely my weakest link. Um, but yeah, a place to keep those events going. It also, we started doing these events with this is all pre-pandemic, of course, but there's a music venue here in Portland that's super popular called Holocene, and so we were doing one or two a year of these events with them, where they would curate three bands, like a set
Hmm.
bands, and then I would help collaborate and find puppeteers that were interested in collaborating with each band, and they would pair up and then go away and then come back like 4 months later, and we would have this like one night show at Holocene, which is a huge, it's not huge, it's a really big venue though. It's a big dance venue in town, and they do live music. And so we do a one night only puppet show thing called Pop and Puppetry with them. So that became a place to put those events, and
Cool.
those were great. A lot of work, and not a lot of ability to hone in technically on the lighting part of it, which was always a little
Hmm.
tough. It is set up as like a dance venue, but we
Right.
figured out after a couple of tries how to the limitations that the puppeteer should put on themselves not to do something small, because it's a big venue. So started to do more like casting shadows on the big walls that they had all around, and they have live feed projectors that would project onto three different walls while the music was playing and stuff. So yeah, so that sort of got glommed into the Beady Little Eyes umbrella, and I'm trying to think of what else there was. And I like to keep up the mailing list stuff, because man, at the beginning of 2020, before all this stuff went down, there were so many puppet things happening. There was like
Yeah.
the Chicago company, Manual Cinema, was doing shows here in Eugene, and there were
Hmm.
just, it just felt like I started sending these newsletters out, because I was like, I can't even keep it up. Like, they're not Beady Little Eyes events. It's just there's so much happening. There was another slam called Tiny Dreams Puppet Slam that was happening here, and I wanted to support them. And then there's this festival called the Fertile Ground Festival, which is always in January, February, and it's always brand new works, like never before seen anywhere else. And there were like three or four puppet shows in that. It was just like really amazing. Like, there was a lot of stuff happening. And there's this thing here in town too called the Pbx Puppet Collective, which is an actual collective that used to meet about once or twice a month, and it would be taught by different people in town that were puppet builders, or stop motion creators or movement, like voice stuff. Yeah, it was really cool, and it was really everything was sort of like gelling and things were happening. So of course that's
Mm-hmm.
all to a bit of a halt, which has
Mm-hmm.
meant some steam has been lost on the Beady Little Eyes blog and all the things because
Sure.
there isn't live events, and I don't think there will be for a while.
Yeah.
Uh,
Let me just take this moment to let anyone who's watching know that if you want to type in questions or comments, we'll for either me or Katie, type them into the comment section and we'll see it. We're both on Facebook Live and YouTube Live right now, so we've got people on both audiences. But I want to know, I'm curious about that moment when last week I was talking with Emily DeCola and Michael Schupach about the creation of Puppet Kitchen, and I'm really curious about the moment that you had where you were like, oh, this isn't Katie McClenahan doing puppet work. This is a company. Like, this is Beady Little Eyes, or this is a company, and I shall call it Beady Little Eyes. Or like, what was your process? What was your decision-making process around making a company?
So when I was in New York at the very end, like within the last year of me living there, I had submitted to be in a puppet slam there and got rejected. And so sometimes rejection creates some fire in you. I was like kind of pissed.
Oh
It
my
was
gosh, who would reject you? What slam was it? I want their names.
you know, slam. But so we got rejected, and that was a bummer. And I was like, you know what? I can just do my own. And so I was like, I'm gonna move to Portland. I'm gonna do my own. Damn it. Well, there's a little bit of that in there.
Great.
But the name was a dream. It was like one of those classic things where I had a dream about it and woke up and I was like, oh, Beady Little Eyes. Doesn't make any sense. Um,
Except that it makes all the sense it's like a perfect name for a puppet company. It's great.
Yeah. Well, I just didn't want it not to be disparaging, but I didn't want it to be like strings and things or like
Yeah, you definitely don't want a company with puppet in the name of it.
never.
It's probably not a good idea to do that.
No, I think the word puppet's allowed. I think that it was like I don't know, but like puppets with a Z at the end. That's not allowed. It's like
That's like approximately 10% cooler. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I guess yeah, but it didn't make a lot of sense to me at the time. But I was like, well, I guess this is the name of it. And I was also I had just moved to Portland, and it was out of some form of like unemployment impatience. Like I was like I just moved here. I don't know anybody, and
Right.
it was like a way to be like, oh, I saw they used to do something in town called Drunk Puppet Night, and I kept hearing
Okay.
about it. There were people were
Mm-hmm.
like, oh yeah, they used to do this, but they don't do it anymore. And I was like, who's that? Oh, connect me with them. And so I started just like old school emailing people that were at all involved with puppetry in Portland so that I could get to know them. And that's how I met Nicholas uh,
Mm-hmm.
and some other just incredible makers and builders and sculptors. And there's just tons of them here in Portland, but there weren't a lot of there weren't any slams when I started here. And so I
Mm-hmm.
saw the need for it. I think, there's no replacement for stage time. You can make and build and rehearse and do all the things, but like just actually logging the time on stage, there's not any like shortcut or replacement for that. So I
Yeah.
wanted to provide that selfishly for me, so I could do some performance stuff and then also to help other people and showcase the other talent that's here.
And are you guys part of the Puppet Slam network?
Yeah. Oh yeah. We are taking before the whole pandemic hit. We decided to take this. The royal we, decided to
Mm-hmm.
take a year off of puppet slams, but I
Mm-hmm.
was doing it every year up until this year. So I don't know if that means we're not a part of the network anymore. I'm not sure, but we didn't apply for the grant in
Mm-hmm.
2020 with plans to work on a new film, and that also got postponed because of the pandemic. But
Can you just talk a little bit about what that network is like, or what it is?
yeah, Puppet Slam Network. It's great. It's a resource. There's a ton of slams in the country, way more than I knew existed before it. And it's as far from my experience, it helps connect people that are doing slams. You get a newsletter every week of all the slams that are happening in the country and pictures and what they've done. And now with the pandemic being what it is, there's a whole lot more stuff going on online. So there's shows that I could see now that I would have never been able to go to Atlanta to check out or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool that it's keeping everybody connected in that way. People that are producing the slams, but also people that are interested and want to watch the slams.
Yeah.
So
And
cool.
yeah. And just getting back into like the nuts and bolts of making a company, because I know that this is a question that comes up for puppeteers a lot, which is like if you're an artist and you're working in puppetry a lot and you're like doing your own stuff, but also there's this kind of feeling that making a company is something that people do, which is the feeling we had when we started Puppet Kitchen, was like a company is a thing that happens sometimes. And like, but I think it's always a question of like, how what was how did you find out what starting a company was going to be, or like what those steps were going to be?
Um, Sometimes I say like, "Oh yeah, I got knocked up with my own company," because that's kind of what it felt like. It just like happened to me, but that's not true. Actually, that's not all that accurate. I had when I was living in New York, I was like running my ass off working a lot of jobs. So like a lot of people there do, you included. But
Yeah.
I was working at a retail store and I was working freelance, helping like assistant style photo shoots. And I was just doing 1,000 things. And I have an uncle who's an entrepreneur, also living in the city. And he approached me and was like, "Hey, we want to start this art gallery and we want you to run it. Like, we can see that like you've run all these retail stores in Brooklyn. You do this, you do that, you do the other. Like, we would like you to stop doing all of the jobs and just do this one with us."
Uh-huh.
And so it was like it was kind of sweet. And they like presented me with a folder and they're like, "It's going to be called Charming Wall and it's going to be in the West Village and we have the space staked out and you just have to say yes to helping us to running it every day on your own, like in the space, and then curating it
Hmm.
and then managing it." And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah." Like it was like they were like, "You can think about it," and I was like, "No, definitely. Like this sounds really good. This is what I
Yeah.
do now." So kind of just like that, I became a gallery manager, but also um, with the best bosses in the world because he was my aunt and uncle. So, um, and he just has an incredible brain. So, I mean, I would sit down and we'd go through like, I learned all about QuickBooks and accounting and how to
Hmm.
manage that. And then I would, we wanted to be open 7 days a week at one point. So I hired someone to come in and work 2 days a week. And so interviewing people and doing all the paperwork and then curating and finding artists to come in and install shows in the space. And so that
Hmm.
was just, again, like a stroke of luck, but also just learning on the fly with people
Hmm.
willing to help me out with any small question I ever had. Unfortunately, for that, the timing of that, we opened in 2000 October 2007, which was right in the middle of the financial meltdown.
Yes.
People would just come into the gallery and be like, "Well, I can't afford art. I don't need art," and they would walk out.
Right.
It
Right.
was not something that people wanted to spend money on in a financial crisis, and it was a crisis, as everybody saw. And so it it did stay open. We did like limp along for a good 2 years or so. Uh,
Hmm.
that was also an experience where I realized that I needed to collaborate with other people more than I was there. It was mostly just me inside of a tiny shop by myself all day.
Hmm.
and not a lot of space to run around. And that was probably the biggest struggle, but also learning curve of being in there was that like, I need to work with people. I need to, if I ever work alone, and in freelance, I do work alone a lot. I'm very autonomous, leading up to it. And then after the shoot, it's all like just me in my house or office or whatever. But it's peppered with quite a bit of people time and calls and collaboration. And this job wasn't that. So I did learn a ton about what it means to, like, the things you have to do and the steps you have to take to maintain a business. Cause I did all of that alongside my aunt and uncle. So.
Right. That's cool. That's really kind of amazing.
It was amazing.
Valuable.
It was kind of like going to business school,
exactly.
But going to business school and on like a small kind of way where I got paid a living wage, and I'm still really, really super thankful for that entire opportunity, because as far as I know, I might still be working children's retail in Brooklyn.
Right.
A crazy boss.
Yeah.
So.
Are there, this is kind of my last big question, but are there things that you have, because I feel like, you did mention that the production management side of your brain is very different than the creative side of your brain, and that they can kind of be at odds with one another. I mean, part of my question is whether or not what kind of strategies you have to manage those two, but also are there things that you've learned from the puppetry community that you've taken into your project management career? Things that you feel like have helped you be a better project manager because of your experience in puppetry?
Yeah, it is hard to, I mean, in my professional job, I definitely switch train tracks all day, I feel. So my brain's accustomed to doing that for work stuff. And then, like when I go to the O'Neill Puppetry Conference, one of my favorite things to do is actually to just switch the production side of my brain off if I can manage it. Literally let other people take care of all of the details. That's like it's like my time where I don't have to manage anything. But I think it takes some mental steps to be like this, and it also helps to fly across the country, go to a place that I'm not a part of, right? A lot harder for me to do that here in Portland when like I'm the one running the puppet slam, to then go and make a show that's going to be in the slam and not think about all the details associated with it is impossible.
Right.
But it is, as far as like just the flexibility of puppeteers in general and the kindness that they express, at least here in Portland, it's just, there's some incredible people here that are, open to feedback and want to collaborate and want to make work together. I don't know. As far as what do I take into professional worlds, I definitely have become pickier about the worlds that I will work in, I think, because I know.
What do you mean?
I know how well I can get along with these puppeteers and people that I gravitate towards. And so to compromise on that for money, for a job where the people are like, they'll call me and be like, I need to shoot next week. And I'm like, whoa, hang on. And then like, alarm bells going off. I'm like, they're like, it's a video shoot. It's a blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, I haven't actually done, commercial video. I usually do commercial still work. This is back then. They'll try and like pressure me into doing it. And I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm actually booked. Like, I'll just pass like early on, because I know when the chemistry, like, maybe that's just like becoming an adult or something, but when there's just not people chemistry there, you just can't, like, sure, you're going to probably offer me a decent day rate to do your project, but if you're going to yell at me, or you want me to yell at people for running eggs,
right.
Like there's like this whole thing where I'm like, it's just not going to work. And so I like trusting your spidey senses and knowing that like, oh, I could work on that right now, or I could just say no. And then typically, like, whatever gap is left, like, it just gets filled in somehow. It's either it'll get filled in by something in my personal life that I want to go do, or
Hmm.
like I've been pretty lucky to be working consistently. Um, but even if I'm not, I have no regrets about turning down people, knowing that it's just not. So I guess that if there's any one thing from puppetry or just the world of the people that I know and love so well, it's just to not compromise on the quality of people that you're willing to spend time with. It's just not worth it.
Yeah, I think that's really good life advice, actually.
Cool.
I mean, I think that
Yeah.
would play out to pretty much all areas of a person's life. It's a really good uh, measurement.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah.
well, any last advice from one Handmade Puppet Dreams filmmaker to a brand new one?
Well, have so much fun. I'm so excited that they're doing pandemic based commissions, because I think it definitely will change it changes your parameters, right? It's like having to fly the puppets across the country kind of parameter we had. But I work
Right.
really well with rules around stuff like that. If it,
Same.
you have it's a micro commission, so sky's not the limit, but you can do a lot inside your own home, so that's cool. As far
Yeah.
as it goes, yeah, I don't know, have fun. I don't know. Don't collaborate with people that are
That's perfect. Katie, thank you so much for being on the show. This has been an absolute joy. As usual, talking to you is a real pleasure. Um, I hope that everyone who's watching gets to collaborate with you at some point, and that everyone, gets to work with you. It really is. You're really one of the greats. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for talking about production management, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on the show. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, everyone. That brings us to the end of another episode of Puppet Time Online, brought to you by the Puppet Kitchen. Be sure to join us next week. We will most likely be back at our regular time, Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, right in the middle of the week. And we're going to have another great guest on, so be sure to check it out. We're going to be on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. Which means like and don't forget to smash that like button and the little bell and subscribe to us on YouTube so you can be sure to catch us every week. And the bell means you get a little notification about it. I do have a couple of shout outs that I want to give for today. As some of you may or may not know, I'm one of the officers of the Puppetry Guild of Greater New York, or Pbx. And I'm currently the treasurer. We're having elections coming up soon. And if you want to get involved in the puppetry scene in New York, this is a great place to get involved. So sign up. We're still having meetings virtually while we're in lockdown. You can find them at pgogny.org. It's pronounced Pbx. Which also reminds me, speaking of elections, that there is a more important election coming up. So you should go to vote.org. Check out your voter registration, make sure you're registered to vote, make sure you have a voting plan, and that you are ready to vote it's a presidential election, but there's also tons of other things to vote on this coming November in the general election. So with that, I want to say thanks to our guest, Katie McClenahan, and thank you to all of you out there watching. And just remember, until next time, you don't have to do everything to do something. We'll see you next time.